A white envelope. Paisley Park Archives, 2018. 31 years of silence, waiting in purple darkness. Inside, words from a man who would never speak again. 2 legends, 1 letter, and a question that haunts music history. Why did Prince never open it? David Bowie died in January 2016. Prince followed 3 months later. Between them, an unopened letter that could have changed everything. But here's what nobody understands. This wasn't about rivalry, hatred, or ego. The truth is far more devastating. And when archivists finally broke the seal in 2018, what they discovered inside made them realize the letter wasn't about music at all. Before we dive deeper into this mystery, if you're fascinated by untold stories from music history, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you the real stories behind the legends, the moments that shaped culture, and the truths that were never meant to be found. 1987 was not just another year in music. It was the year Prince released Sign of the Times, a double album that critics would later call one of the greatest artistic achievements in popular music history. Prince had recorded nearly everything himself, playing 27 instruments across 16 tracks, producing a work so complete, so visionary, that it seemed to exist outside of time itself. He was at the absolute peak of his creative powers, a man who had transformed himself into something beyond human, a symbol, a force, an idea that couldn't be contained by a simple name. David Bowie, meanwhile, was in Switzerland. He had just released Never Let Me Down, an album that would become one of the most critically panned works of his career. For the first time in his life, Bowie felt creatively lost. The man who had reinvented himself a dozen times, who had given the world Ziggy Stardust and the Thin White Duke, who had changed popular music as profoundly as anyone who ever lived, suddenly found himself adrift. The 80s had not been kind to him. His experimental phase had alienated fans. His commercial attempts had felt hollow. And now, approaching his 40th birthday, David Bowie sat in his Swiss retreat and wondered if his best days were behind him. That's when he thought of Prince, not as a rival, not as competition, but as someone who might understand what it meant to live inside a creative prison of your own making, to be so brilliant that the world expected miracles from you every single time you touched an instrument, to be so transformative that anything less than perfection felt like failure. Bowie had watched Prince's trajectory with something close to awe. Here was an artist who refused to compromise, who battled record labels with a ferocity Bowie had never possessed, who would literally change his name to escape the machinery of the music industry. Prince was doing what Bowie had always wanted to do, but never quite managed. He was staying true to himself, completely, absolutely, without apology. So Bowie wrote a letter. Not a business proposal, not a collaboration pitch, something more personal than that. Something that required vulnerability, the kind of emotional nakedness that neither man was particularly comfortable displaying. He sealed it in a white envelope, wrote Prince's name on the front in his own handwriting, and sent it across the Atlantic to Paisley Park. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what Paisley Park meant to Prince. This wasn't just a recording studio. It wasn't just a home. Paisley Park was Prince's fortress against a world that constantly demanded pieces of him he wasn't willing to give. Built in 1987 at a cost of $10 million, the 65,000 square foot complex in Chanhassen, Minnesota became the physical manifestation of Prince's need for total creative control. Inside those walls, Prince made all the decisions. He controlled every note, every lyric, every visual element of his artistic output. No record executives, no producers telling him what radio wanted, no compromises. The staff at Paisley Park learned quickly that Prince operated according to rules that made sense only to him. He would record at 3 in the morning and expect his band to be ready. He would write a complete song in 20 minutes and demand it be recorded immediately before the inspiration faded. He maintained absolute privacy, screening all visitors, all mail, all contact with the outside world through layers of assistants and security personnel. Nothing reached Prince unless he decided it should reach him. When Bowie's letter arrived, it went through the same process as everything else. An assistant received it, logged it, and placed it in the sorting system that determined what Prince would see immediately and what would be filed away for later consideration. The letter was marked, catalogued, and placed in the vault, that legendary archive where Prince stored everything he deemed important but not urgent. Thousands of unreleased songs lived in that vault. Master recordings, alternate versions, entire albums that the world would never hear. And now, one white envelope from David Bowie. Prince saw the letter. Multiple staff members would later confirm this. He held it in his hands, looked at the return address, acknowledged its existence. And then he placed it back in the vault. Unopened, not discarded, not destroyed, just stored. Filed away in purple darkness alongside all the other pieces of his creative life that he wasn't ready to process yet. What people never understood about Prince was that his perfectionism wasn't vanity. It was survival. He had been gifted, or cursed, depending on how you looked at it, with a musical genius so complete that it threatened to consume him. He could hear entire symphonies in his head. He could pick up instruments he had never touched before and master them within days. He could write lyrics that cut straight to the emotional core of human experience, could craft melodies that felt like they had always existed, just waiting for him to discover them. But that gift came with a price. Nothing was ever quite good enough. Every song could be better. Every performance could be tighter. Every creative decision could be reconsidered, reworked, perfected. Prince's bandmates described working with him as exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. Wendy Melvoin, guitarist for The Revolution, once recalled a session where Prince spent 6 hours on a single 4-bar guitar solo, playing it over and over, adjusting the tone, the attack, the emotional resonance, until it achieved whatever impossible standard existed in his mind. He wasn't cruel about it. He didn't yell or demean anyone. He simply refused to accept anything less than perfection from himself or anyone working with him. And that perfectionism extended to every aspect of his life, including how he managed his emotional landscape. Opening Bowie's letter would have meant confronting whatever was inside. It would have meant engaging with the thoughts and feelings of another artist at his level, someone who might ask questions or express vulnerabilities that Prince wasn't prepared to address. So he did what he always did when faced with emotional complexity that threatened his creative focus. He sealed it away. Not out of disrespect for Bowie, not out of fear exactly, but out of a deep understanding that some things, once acknowledged, cannot be unacknowledged. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Throughout the late 80s and into the 90s, Prince and Bowie continued their separate trajectories. Bowie eventually found his footing again, formed Tin Machine, experimented with industrial rock, and gradually rebuilt his creative confidence. Prince released album after album: Lovesexy, Batman, Graffiti Bridge, Diamonds and Pearls, maintaining his prolific output even as he waged war against Warner Brothers. The record label, he felt, was treating him like property rather than an artist. In 1993, Prince changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol, writing "slave" on his face during performances to protest his contract. He became the artist formerly known as Prince, a walking statement about artistic freedom and the music industry's tendency to own artists rather than collaborate with them. They crossed paths occasionally: award shows, industry events, mutual friends in the music world who knew both men. But they never spoke directly. Not at Michael Jackson's memorial service, where both attended. Not at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where both were inductees. They existed in the same universe, but on parallel tracks that never quite intersected. And in the vault at Paisley Park, the white envelope remained sealed, accumulating years like dust. Bowie never asked about the letter. He never followed up, never sent another message, never mentioned it in interviews. Those close to him said he seemed to accept that Prince had made a choice, and that choice deserved respect. Perhaps Bowie understood something that most people didn't: that silence can be its own form of communication, that not responding is sometimes the most honest response possible. January 10th, 2016. David Bowie released Black Star, his 25th studio album. 2 days later, he died of liver cancer. The world mourned. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music industry. Artists who had been influenced by Bowie, which was nearly everyone, shared their memories, their gratitude, their grief. Prince said nothing publicly. He didn't release a statement. He didn't perform a tribute. He maintained the same silence he had maintained for 29 years. But those close to Prince noticed something. In the weeks following Bowie's death, Prince spent even more time than usual in Paisley Park, often alone, often playing piano in the main studio late into the night. His engineer, who had worked with him for over a decade, described hearing Prince play Heroes at 3 a.m, his own interpretation of Bowie's anthem, stripped down to just vocals and piano. The engineer stood outside the studio door, listening, knowing better than to interrupt. When Prince finished, there was silence. Then he played it again and again, as if he was trying to communicate something through music that he couldn't express any other way. April 20th, 2016, 3 months and 11 days after Bowie's death. Prince was found unresponsive in an elevator at Paisley Park. The autopsy would later reveal an accidental overdose of fentanyl, the opioid he had been taking for chronic pain related to decades of performing in high heels and pushing his body beyond its physical limits. He was 57 years old. The music world, still reeling from losing Bowie, now had to process losing Prince. 2 legends, 2 transformative artists, both gone within 100 days of each other. When someone dies without clear estate planning, everything they left behind becomes subject to legal scrutiny. Prince had no will, no instructions about how his vast archive should be handled. The vault at Paisley Park, rumored to contain enough unreleased music for a new album every year for the next century, suddenly became a legal battlefield. Prince's siblings, the IRS, music executives, lawyers, everyone wanted a piece of what Prince had left behind. Courts appointed archivists to catalog everything, to create a comprehensive inventory of Prince's creative legacy. That's how, in 2018, a team of professional archivists found themselves inside the vault, documenting every item. Thousands of master tapes, handwritten lyrics, unreleased albums, concert footage, personal journals, and tucked between a box of session tapes from the Love Sexy era and a stack of handwritten chord progressions, they found a white envelope. The return address read, David Bowie, Switzerland. The postmark, September 1987. The seal, unbroken. The archivists faced an ethical dilemma. Prince had chosen not to open this letter. That choice meant something. Opening it now felt like a violation of his privacy, a betrayal of whatever boundary he had been maintaining. But they also had a legal obligation to catalog everything, to document the complete contents of the estate. After consultation with Prince's family and legal team, they made the decision. They would open the letter. They would read it. They would document what it contained. 3 people were present when the seal was broken. The head archivist, a legal representative, a family member who had requested to be there. They opened the envelope carefully, preserving it as much as possible. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Bowie's distinctive script. They read it in silence. And when they finished, they looked at each other with something like heartbreak in their eyes. The letter wasn't about music. It wasn't a collaboration proposal. It wasn't industry gossip or technical discussion about production techniques. David Bowie had written to Prince about loneliness, about what it meant to be so different from everyone around you that you could never fully be understood, about the isolation that comes with genius, the way it separates you from normal human connection because nobody else can quite follow where your mind goes, about the exhaustion of constantly being expected to be brilliant, to be transformative, to be more than human. Bowie wrote about watching Prince from afar, recognizing in him a kindred spirit, someone else who had changed his identity to escape expectation, who had fought against industry machinery, who had paid the price that genius demands. He wrote about his own struggles with depression, with the fear that his best work was behind him, with the crushing weight of his own legacy. He wrote about feeling, despite all his success and all his fame, fundamentally alone in the world. And he wrote that he thought maybe Prince felt it too. That maybe, just maybe, they could talk about it. Not as competitors, not as colleagues, but as two people who understood what it meant to live inside their own heads, isolated by the very gifts that made them special. The letter ended with a phone number, Bowie's private line in Switzerland, an invitation, not to collaborate, just to talk, to share the burden of being who they were, to acknowledge that someone else understood. Prince never called. He never opened the envelope. He never read those words. But here's what the archivists realized as they stood in that vault, holding Bowie's handwriting in their hands. Prince didn't need to read it. He already knew what it said. He knew because he felt the same things. He knew because he and Bowie were mirror images of each other, different in style and approach, but fundamentally the same in the ways that mattered. Prince didn't open the letter because opening it would have meant acknowledging that loneliness, that vulnerability, that fundamental human need for connection that his perfectionism and his privacy and his creative fortress were all designed to protect him from. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be understood. Some connections exist beyond words. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who reaches out to you is to acknowledge their gesture without forcing yourself to fully engage with it. Prince kept the letter. He didn't destroy it. He preserved it in his vault, alongside everything else that mattered to him. That was his way of saying, I hear you, I understand, and I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. But thank you for seeing me. Both men are gone now. The letter has been read, documented, and returned to the Prince Estate archives. The full text has never been made public, in respect for both artists' privacy. But the story of its existence has become part of music history, a reminder that even legends struggle with the same fundamental human needs that everyone struggles with. The need to be understood, the need to connect, the need to know that someone else out there feels what you feel. Prince spent his entire life building walls around his inner world, protecting the vulnerable human being inside the Purple Fortress. He gave the world his music, his performances, his brilliance. But he kept his pain, his fears, his loneliness locked away in the vault. Bowie's letter was an invitation to let someone past those walls, and Prince chose not to accept it. Not because he didn't want connection, but because accepting it would have meant acknowledging that he needed it. And for Prince, maintaining control meant never admitting need. In the end, the unopened letter tells us more about both men than any interview or biography ever could. It tells us that genius is often accompanied by profound isolation, that success doesn't cure loneliness, that even the most brilliant among us struggle with basic human connection, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're not ready to reach back. David Bowie tried. Prince preserved that attempt. Both choices required courage. Both choices deserved respect. And the silence between them, 31 years of unopened potential, stands as a testament to the complicated reality of being extraordinary in a world designed for ordinary people. The letter wasn't about music at all. It was about two human beings, trapped inside their own genius, trying to find a way to be less alone. One asked the question. The other held the answer close to his heart, unread but not forgotten. And maybe that's its own kind of connection. Maybe that's enough.